So it's time to get technical. Okay. Now, in this particular example that I'm showing you here, I use the Unreal Engine 4, and I specifically use the Open World Demo Collection, which is free, as is the Unreal Engine, unless you're shipping on it, of course. This was one of the demos that they did a few years ago at GDC. I'm using this purely and simply from a demo perspective, so that you can see sort of what's going on, and it also looks quite pretty. With the current version of how things work, we actually do things slightly different here at Redhill Games, but the basic principle is the same. First, we need to load in the audio bank. Now, an audio bank is when I've had all my sounds and I've got my bird song in my middleware, we have to put them in what is effectively a suitcase full of sound. And once I've added them to a suitcase full of sound, we know that like this bit here, this bank has these sounds in it, and I only load in, I only open this case of sounds when we need it. So if we walk into an area where there are birds, we open up this sound bank. I've added a box around an area I want to populate with ambient audio, and I've called it an ambient zone. Now, what this is effectively doing is in Unreal, you can add any one of different shapes, and whether it be a sphere or a box or a cube or anything like that. Now, all I've used is a box collision for this, and I've just scaled it around the. I've put it around the area that I want to populate with sound, and you'll notice that I've added under there. I've had the sparrow sound, the woodpecker, crickets, and forest birds, and I've added a sphere to that underneath. Now, the only reason that I've added a sphere is so that you can actually see it. In a real game situation, you wouldn't actually have a sphere that the player can see every time that sound is played. That would be invisible. But I'm doing it here just so that you can actually see what's going on and when. We'll refer to that later in a separate video. So what I'm going to do is we're going to get a random location within the ambient zone. So to do this in Unreal, it's a very modular thing, and like you can use math, and I'm reliably informed this is a kind of coding, which is hilarious because I can't code myself out of a plastic bag. But we still need to be a little bit maths. So here in this example, we get a random location within that box extent. And once we've got that random location, we can place something in that random location. Now, this could be anything from a sound to a unicorn to a spawn point. It's like whatever you want to happen in that particular location, this is how you would do it. Once we've got that location, we can play a sound. In this example, we're playing just the sparrow. So it's just a one-shot fire and forget tweet sound that plays at that location, which we worked out earlier. And then we can repeat this with multiple different areas. So like here we have things like woodpeckers and crickets and sparrows, but you can have like distant car horns in there, or gusts of wind. You can add anything that you wanted to sort of populate in your game world. You can add to this ambient zone, and it just plays that one sound and then it forgets about it. Which begs the question, why should we do that? What's the point when you could just record a 30-second ambient loop and just play the ambience? Well, if you're in an open world game, or you're in a game world where the player can just sit on their arse for about 45 minutes and not really do anything, you might not want to have the same thing looping time and time again. Likewise, if you're in a puzzle game, for an example, and it takes the player 10 minutes to solve a puzzle, you might want it to sound dynamically different. You might also have things like a time of day changes, so like a day and night cycle, which you might want to change. Like you might not want crickets to be playing during the night. You might want owls instead of sparrows. So you can do that just using this. The other reason to do it this way is it helps you out with your memory management as well, because we're not playing one long extended file. We're playing lots of very short, tiny 35, 40 kilobytes of audio. We're not playing, 250 megabytes of 35-minute audio, which means you can free that up for other things, for like music or dialogue and things like that. So it's a very efficient way of dealing with your ambience. And it also puts you as a listener in a position where you can stay in the same place and you will never hear the same thing twice. It will be dynamically changing with the player. And that's something that is quite important. And you can add these areas, these ambient zones, to different areas of your map. So you might have a city center which you want to have car horns in, but then the player might move from the city center to the outskirts of the city in a forest area where you don't want to hear the car horns. You want to hear owls and crickets, and you want to be more sort of countryside with your soundscape. And you can overlap those two so that when you go from one point to another point, it nicely transitions into the two, and you've not really had to deal with crossfading of files. And it's a very smart and efficient way of doing it, and it also adds you it immediately pulls you in. But this kind of thing can take you anything up to 1 day to do, and then you can just recycle it. It's like, okay, well, we know that we have this new level that is going to be based in the forest. Okay, I just click and drag that blueprint into my level, and now that level has ambience. So it's very, very efficient. So here's a video of this randomly spawning the animals in the game world. Now, the spheres, as I mentioned earlier, this is where the actual bird songs are being played from. The sphere that you see around that, the wire mesh sphere, that's actually the attenuation. So that's anything inside of that you will hear. So if I move to the middle of the area, it's randomly picking a position in the game world and randomly playing the sounds at any one particular. It doesn't really matter. So here we're adding in a little bit more sort of audio. The reason why I've done an extended version of this is so that you can see the implications of it over a longer period of time. Now here I've added in some dynamic tree movement sounds. Should be very quiet, but you should be able to hear it. Now in the background there, you might have heard a little bit of thunder. What's that sound, I wonder? This very crudely demonstrates the example that I gave earlier with the fried bacon, different bird song and distant thunderstorms. This is all in a game engine, so if this was like, this could be in your game. This is how it would be heard. This is how it would be presented. It's very crude and it's very harshly put together, but you get a good idea as to sort of how it all is stitched together and how it works. Now there's lots of other things that you can do in the game world with this, like the thunderstorm, the bolts of lightning and the thunder. You can actually move that across the game world so that you can have the thunderstorm that goes overhead. We can introduce wind into the game map, and we can base the player location and the player altitude based on the wind. So the higher up the player is, the player elevation, the higher the elevation, the windier it is. There's lots of things that we can do and we can add in just to make it more immersive for the players almost immediately.